Good trip tomorrow. Welcome to the Ingraham Angle. I'm Laura Ingraham. On yet another busy night here in Washington, we have an exclusive, very big interview tonight. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo sat down with me for a rare interview to discuss, among other topics, whether John Kerry, Obama's former Secretary of State, broke U.S. law by meddling in our foreign policy. Plus, he'll offer his first reaction to an undercover video where a State Department employee suggests that there is a resistance inside the administration. Oh, goody. And Raymond Arroyo is here with a seen and unseen, I actually can say, for the ages. Here it goes. What does Roseanne's death, the sexuality of the Muppets, and Jack Black all have in common? We'll find out. Plus, Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff employ a last-ditch effort to stall the president's order to declassify certain documents and texts related to the Russia investigation. So my question is, what are they afraid is going to come out? But we begin tonight with the very latest on the fast-developing Brett Kavanaugh fight. The calls began early this morning. The message for the Kavanaugh resistance was clear, and it began with an appearance of the ghost of a confirmation past.
They wanted an FBI investigation before she testifies. Is that the right move? Should the Senate honor her request?
Absolutely, it's the right move. The hearing questions need to have a frame, and the investigation is the best frame for that.
I mean, the FBI is good at this. They do cold cases all the time. They can, in a matter of probably days, figure out whether there's corroboration for Dr. Blasey Ford's accounts.
It would be helpful if Judge Kavanaugh came forward and said, I would prefer to have a background investigation by the FBI.
Oh, my God. I think one of them is less intelligent than the next. I'm sorry, God bless them, but we're going to get to that. Amazing how none of them, though, want to examine the facts, so we're going to do that. Now, just last night, we had a former high-level FBI agent tell us that the Democrats are trying to use the FBI as their, quote, political animal against Kavanaugh. And the FBI doesn't like that much. If testimonials like that aren't enough, our own John Roberts reported today that a current highly placed law enforcement official is saying that there will not be an FBI investigation into the allegations leveled at Kavanaugh, and here's why. First, there cannot be a criminal investigation. There's no crime alleged where the statute of limitations has not run out. There are no allegations of a federal crime. And third, the only investigation the FBI does is the background investigation. They find info and pass it on. That's already been done in this case. They don't investigate the information. The law enforcement source went on to tell Fox News, quote, this is a political issue, not a law enforcement one. And boy, is that true. It isn't just the politically inclined advancing this narrative. Their favorite media cheerleaders are piling on. Take NBC's Ken Dilanian, who tweeted this afternoon, quote, a number of former prosecutors and FBI agents have said today that people who make up allegations tend not to demand that the FBI investigate them. Well, he's, of course, not the only one advancing this narrative, but there is one problem with this contention. Ford hasn't actually stated that she's willing to talk to the FBI. She just wants Kavanaugh investigated. Think that might be kind of an important fact or detail? Late this afternoon, Senator Grassley, seemingly at wit's end over this whole charade, submitted a letter which was scathing to the Judiciary Committee Democrats, slamming their persistent, quote, abuse of this confirmation process through delay and obstruction with every argument available. Here to shed more light on this is former Assistant Director of the FBI, Bill Gavin. Bill, it's great to have you on tonight. You were called out, by the way, by Ken Dilanian, which we will play in a moment. But your reaction to where we stand now with the drumbeat, it's this incessant drumbeat for FBI involvement. Bill.
Laura, I'm amazed at this whole thing. Number one, everybody's calling for an investigation. An investigation of what? There is no predicate offense for the federal government in the form of the FBI to conduct any investigation. An investigation, if there was a rape or a sexual assault, should have been done by local authorities, and everybody knows that the statute of limitations has run on that now. That's number one. Number two, background investigations, it's over, it's done. Now, could the White House conceivably say, we'd like you to open it up again? They could, but it's not going to happen. In this particular case, what could come from opening the background investigation again? We go out and interview who? Number one, the alleged victim has been offed by Senator Feinstein, where she produced a heavily redacted letter that really hints at something that nobody knows what happened. Number two, Judge Kavanaugh has already given his point of view. Number three, his friend has already alleged that I have no knowledge of anything like this, nor would I think that Judge Kavanaugh would do anything like that. What they're trying to do is put the FBI in a jackpot. It's a no-win situation for the Bureau. You go out and nothing is found. They're going to say, you didn't do your job. You're only supporting the contention. You're all Republicans, and that's the end of it.
But I got to say, Ken Delanian from NBC, it took you to task on that analysis. I want to play it for you, and then, Bill, get you to react on the other side. Let's watch.
My sources are frankly presenting another view than the one you just heard from Bill Gavin, which is that the FBI absolutely could investigate this, not as a criminal matter, but as part of their role background checking federal nominees. But they could only do that if the White House asked them to look into this allegation. And if the White House did ask them to do that, they would be perfectly capable of shedding some light on this.
So this is the rub. It's the president. It always goes back to President Trump. If President Trump really cared about women and to protect women and cared about sexual assault allegations, he would demand that the FBI, I guess, go back and, again, find every house with a pool in Chevy Chase, Maryland or something, and then try to get these old Georgetown prep kids to rack their brains about, some keg party 36 years ago. But they're trying to put this on Trump. Is there any validity to that point?
No, there is no validity to that point at all. What he says, you could dig up. Who are you going to dig? There's nobody that can tell you anything at this particular point in time. And then he said something about the fact that you could put them under oath. You don't put anybody under oath in a situation like this. You obtain the facts, feed them to the White House or to the Congress, and let them do what they want. It just seems to me
this is political.
Years in the
This is political.
In this 28 years in this law enforcement business, that's all they're trying to do is delay the vote and do it any way they possibly can. I probably shouldn't be sitting here saying that, but that's the exact way I feel, and that's what's going on here.
Bill, I think it's the way a lot of Americans feel tonight, and thanks so much for being here. And in the American justice system, the burden of proof should be on the person leveling the accusations. But in the case of Brett Kavanaugh, it seems that his political opponents want it the other way around. Take this, for instance. Late last night, a second corroborating witness came forward with a letter to Senator Chuck Grassley's office. Patrick J. Smythe, who attended Georgetown Prep with Kavanaugh and believes he was the person labeled PJ in the account Ms. Blasey Ford gave to the Washington Post, he vehemently denied that the party she described ever happened. He further vouched for Kavanaugh's character. Now, this huge development received very little pickup in the more dominant so-called mainstream press, and even by CNN, who broke the story. So the question here is why? Here where the answers are Greg Nunziata, a former chief nominations counsel to the Senate Judiciary Committee, along with Gail Trotter, an attorney and spokeswoman for the Judicial Crisis Network. Greg, let's start with you. Your reaction tonight to the latest developments, specifically, again, the attempt to kind of, I'm so sick of the word weaponize, but it is kind of weaponizing the FBI and what has clearly become a political calculation for the Democrats.
Yeah, that appears to be what's happening here, and it's painful for me to watch. I mean, I used to supervise the background investigation process in the Senate Judiciary Committee. There's a process there. It's confidential. It keeps the politics out of it, keeps the cameras away, and it gets to the bottom of allegations like this. It's designed to avoid politics and to get to the truth. And the Senate Democrats here clearly chose to go another way and to make it about politics in a way that's very unlikely to yield any truth.
Gail, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, who has been a big champion of the Me Too movement, spoke out today with a lot of passion. Let's watch.
They are creating a false choice. They are trying to bully her into testifying on Monday before a full FBI background check is completed. Without the benefit of an FBI investigation where it's nonpartisan and objective, and without the benefit of corroborating witnesses being able to testify, it's a sham hearing. And I don't think she should participate in it.
Shouldn't participate. Sham hearing. A couple days ago, they were asking for her to testify, and she again uses the phrase background check, which again is Ms. Ford applying for a federal job. You don't do a background check as part of this type of process. So I can't believe she's a sitting U.S. senator. Again, I'm sure she's a nice person, but I can't believe she even uses those phrases.
No,
it's
it's
lack of basic knowledge about the process.
It's legal illiteracy. I mean, when you talk about this, Judge Kavanaugh has already passed 6 of these FBI investigations. There were closed hearings about this. And you look at what's happened with the accuser this week. Her lawyers went to the Washington Post to tell the story. Then they said they would let her testify. Then less than 36 hours passed, and they said that she wasn't going to. And I think Senator Grassley and his team should be commended, because they've said, we'll fly to California, we'll fly anywhere, we'll do something public, we'll do something private, we'll do whatever she wants to do so that she can get her story out there, because they want to take her seriously. And yet I think the fact is that this is a partisan smear and attempt to delay, and it's all falling apart.
Yeah, Senator Mazie Hirono, who's also been very vocal on this, she spoke out as well. Let's watch.
The latest being a letter from the chairman to the Democrats saying, we have done everything we can to contact her. That is such I can hardly stand it.
According to Senator Grassley's office, they have made several attempts both to contact her lawyer, phone calls, and I think the total was 9 different attempts at communication, 11 total actually now. So they've been trying, but again, they can't even agree on whether the Grassley's people would be trying to call. I mean, that's just so ridiculous. Of course they're trying to get in touch with her, but I mean, they know Grassley's number too if she wanted to testify, correct, Greg?
Correct, and the Democrats and their staff have refused to participate in the investigative efforts that are going on right now. They're not taking part in the interviews of Judge Kavanaugh about these allegations. They're boycotting everything. So to take the position that somehow the Republicans aren't taking this allegation seriously, when it was the Democrats that sat on the allegation for weeks, and now the Democrats are obstructing any effort to look into them in the committee process where it's supposed to happen.
And Gail made this point, Greg, I really want you to chime in on this, that Senator Grassley, and even I think President Trump said, we want to hear from her today. He said, we want to hear from her, which I thought was really good. And he said, and he's like, well, like to get this done, but he said take as much time as you need, kind of like. He seemed to be even going farther than Grassley did.
Yes.
Grassley said, we'll do it on the phone. It's like a Dr. Seuss play. We'll do it on the phone. We'll interview on the phone. We'll interview in person or in private. We'll do a conference call, whatever. But I don't know what else they can do at this point.
Chairman Grassley has been incredibly accommodating and patient in the face of lots of histrionics and antics from the other side. Beyond that, he's one of the senators who's most well known for his commitment to investigations and oversight. He has a team on the committee that's very experienced in doing these sorts of things, and he's trying to do his job. Which I can't say to be true for everybody else up there.
Gail, again, the other so-called corroborating witness, this Patrick Smythe, I think it's Smythe, might be Smith, he says, as far as he knows, he never seen any type of behavior like this on Brett Kavanaugh's part, but he was in the notes. So every person she cites, this other judge character, and then both of them are actually opposing her view on this. So this case has fallen apart.
Right, and I think you have to take the overwhelming amount of evidence that anyone who knows Judge Kavanaugh, and there's so many people who do, none of them believe that this is a credible allegation.
What happens Friday?
I don't know. We'll see day to day. I think people on the committee still want to hear from the.
She has Friday deadline. That's what Grassley says. Friday deadline. We're going to vote.
Hold the vote.
I call the vote. I'd do the vote on Friday. This is games. You got to end the game, so they're going to keep doing this. You have to teach your kids a lesson sometimes. You have to teach the senators playing this game a lesson. Thank both of you. Great analysis tonight. And we've seen how this fight is playing out in the halls of Congress. But how are the voters processing all of this? For part of that equation, let's bring in GOP pollster Frank Luntz. Frank, from the people you're talking to, how will this entire Kavanaugh circus play out, or if at all, as a midterm issue?
But based on what that conversation you just held, I question whether this will be significant 10 days from now, because it does look like she isn't going to testify. The American people believe in fairness, and they believe that everyone deserves their day in court. They want to hear what she has to say. She leveled some very strong allegations. But I'll tell you that one of the big questions among the men I talked to is how far back are you going to hold someone accountable for the behavior that they did? Is what someone did when you're 17, is that applicable to what someone's life will be when they're in their 50s? Now, for women, the question is she going to get her day in court? Is she going to respond to those both that support her and oppose her? They want to hear what she has to say.
But so I also think, I got to tell you, Frank, I got to tell you, from my radio, I kind of do an informal poll. I mean, it's not scientific, but every day on the radio in the morning. It's very interesting to hear from both women and men. And this is across the country, people calling in from every state. They don't like the whole high school thing, going back to high school, going back this many years. Memories, foggy, people moved on. Unless there was a reputation that is like known by everybody and people, oh yeah, that guy that I heard about. People didn't like it. People don't like it. I think that word fairness that you just used, I'm telling you, I think that cuts right to it. And you can't lob these allegations and then expect you're not going to get any questions because people are being mean to you online. You know, yeah, people are mean online. Welcome to the NFL.
You have to be willing to respond, but I'll tell you, that's why the Democrats have used Anita Hill, because they realized within 24 hours that this story was turning, that people were starting to wonder, why is she backing off? Why, when you make a claim as significant as this, that you're not willing to back it up at that hearing? And so they bring out Anita Hill and that conversation. And what you could have is what happened to Donald Trump in 2016. You know, he won a majority of white women. And everyone thought that because of what had happened during the campaign, he would crater. And one of the reasons why he did is because they thought that he said what he meant and meant what he said. Doesn't mean that they liked his language. In this situation, you may see women angry that they're being used, that they're being scapegoated, that they're being pulled into a political process that they want no part of. Make no mistake, Laura, authenticity matters more than anything in 2016, and this doesn't seem authentic right now.
All right, thanks so much, Frank Luntz. And up next, we have a big exclusive for you. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo joins me in a rare interview. He'll take on John Kerry's attempts to undermine President Trump on the Iran issue and his thoughts on Google kowtowing to the Chinese communists. You do not want to miss this. Up next. Trump has said of his Secretary of State, "We are always on the same wavelength." As you'll see in my interview with Mike Pompeo, that's apparent. We began our conversation today discussing Iran and his predecessor John Kerry's wildly destructive communications with the world's largest state sponsor of terror. Here's part one of my interview with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Mr. Secretary, thanks so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it.
Great to be with you.
Iran in the news. Brian Hook, your special envoy, saying, you know, we want to deal with Iran, but a treaty with Iran. Iranian leaders, no go. They're like, we don't want any dealings with the United States at this point. What's going on?
President Trump's been very clear since the time he was running for office that the arrangement that the previous administration put in place was bad for America, frankly, bad for the world. And so I and Brian are working to get Iran to behave like a normal nation, right? Stop being the world's largest state sponsor of terror. Stop launching missiles through proxies. Stop attacking our embassies and consulates. When we get those basic things in place, President Trump's made very clear. We'd love Iran to rejoin the community of nations, but their revolutionary zeal causes them to be a bad actor, and they need to shape up. And if they do, we'll get it right.
Well, again, you and John Kerry have gone back and forth on this. Former Secretary of State Barack Obama has met 4 times with Iranian leadership. And you guys criticize, saying that's not appropriate given You know, you can't have two-track foreign policy here. But he responded by saying there's nothing unusual, let alone unseemly or inappropriate, about former diplomats meeting with foreign counterparts. Secretary of State Kissinger done it for decades with Russia and China. What is unseemly and unprecedented for the podium of the State Department to be hijacked for political theatrics?
Secretary Kerry can't seem to get off the stage, and you have to. When I'm the former secretary, I'll get off. Every previous former secretary has done that too. It's one thing to meet with your counterpart. It's another thing to do what Secretary Kerry, Wendy Sherman, Ernest Moniz, frankly the whole gang has done, which is to actively seek to undermine what President Trump is trying to achieve. It's okay to talk with them, but you have to be working for America, working for American foreign policy, and they're not. They're working for the foreign policy that is theirs, not the one that belongs to the United States.
Our own Dana Perino last week had Kerry on, and he did not deny that he wanted to basically tell the Iranians that whether he told Iran to wait it out for the next administration.
I think everybody in the world is sitting around talking about waiting out President Trump.
At what point does the administration pursue some type of legal action against former Secretary Kerry and others from the former administration?
You know, I'll leave the legal action to others. I'm trying to execute America's foreign policy, and they are not only unhelpful, but they are acting in ways that are harmful to achieving what's best for the American people. And that's my criticism. Stop it. Let it go. You had your day. We think you fundamentally got it wrong with Iran, and we're trying to make it right for America.
And reducing the refugee number, that's caused great consternation. It's another issue that President Trump campaigned on, extreme vetting, security for our country. Down to 30,000 next fiscal year. Bob Menendez, big fan of the administration, called it cruel and short-sighted. Human Rights First, another group. It's an abdication, Mr. Secretary, of our humanity. Your response?
America is the most generous nation in the history of civilization. It always has been, and it continues to be under President Trump. We want to get it right for the American people. We've taken in over 4 million legal permanent residents in the last almost 2 decades now. We continue to take in more people than most countries in the rest of the world. But we got to get the security piece right. We got to make sure that we allow those who are in most trouble, most harm's way, to be taken care of in the best place to take care of them, nearer their own country. Those are not heartless things. Those are things that are kind and caring and decent. It's the way we ought to treat our fellow human beings, and it's what we in the Trump administration are committing to do.
What does this administration say to the Christian refugees who feel, many of them abandoned for many years, predating this administration, in Syria, in Iraq, and beyond? They can't go to these camps because they're afraid of going to the camps. How do we reach them? How do we get some of them into the country?
So it's an important and difficult challenge. We want to bring in all those who are most in trouble and are having the most difficulty in the places in which they reside. Vice President Pence has made this a real priority to ensure that Christians are being treated fairly and equitably in our processes. We've seen some of these issues in these camps. Rest assured that the State Department's working to make sure that Christians are not being mistreated, prosecuted, persecuted, or treated in any way that's unfair as they try to make their way into the United States of America.
The U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom lists China and Saudi Arabia, right? One, and I think Saudi Arabia is number 3 of the worst violators of human rights. I was thinking about this yesterday because thinking of the old Soviet Union and President Reagan, who both of us admire so much. We didn't do that really heavily engaged trade with the Soviet Union, not just because of nukes, but because of what they were doing on human rights. So how do we justify this huge trading relationship with Saudi Arabia and China, given how we treat then North Korea and a place like Cuba? It seems like there's selective treatment of human rights violations.
So it's always the case when you're trying to advocate for America's interests that you have to weigh the relative concerns, and it is the case that each country presents its own situation. What I think we've been incredibly consistent on is making sure that we identify, we call out these concerns. I've done it with respect to China. I've done it with respect to every place we find religious minorities being mistreated. We held the first ever religious ministerial in the very room in which we're sitting here. It was quite an occasion. People from nearly every religion and 80 delegations. This administration is taking religious freedom all around the world, in China and other places.
1 million
very
Muslims
seriously.
in China being detained, Christian churches, crosses. being smashed, churches driven underground, pastors being imprisoned. And, you know, what we have to talk about, my good friend, President Xi, it's heartbreaking to so many of us who care about religious liberty. And I know this is an administration priority, but what do you do? What leverage do we have with China at this point, other than what we're doing now with trade?
Laura, I'm confident we'll talk about China in other contexts too. It presents a myriad of opportunities, but lots of challenges. You speak of one. This is a non-transparent government. It is still a very centralized government. It treats our intellectual property horribly. It treats its religious minorities horribly. In each of these cases, we have opportunities. You've seen what the president's doing with trade to try and make it fair and reciprocal. What we're asking of China is to behave in a way that if they want to be a power, if they want to be on the global stage, they have to operate in the way that global leaders have for so often. And frankly, as you'd point out in the religious dimension, they've not done that.
We talk a lot about this big tech and the relationship between big tech and this administration, whether it's adversarial. But Google specifically in China, assisting Google in developing an app to further censor free expression and the ability of Chinese citizens to get information. Any thoughts on that? How a U.S. company, obviously huge global company too, assists China in that oppression of free expression?
Laura, it is personally and professionally troubling to me when American companies behave one way here and another way when they're dealing with China. It gets at the core problem that President Trump is trying to address, which is that China doesn't permit American investors to invest on the same terms that Chinese companies can invest here. Joint ventures, the list is long of the non-reciprocal relationship. And the president's trying to balance that. And when we get that right, when government gets that right, we can then force American companies to behave under that set of rules. I want every company, including global giants, to treat American citizens as well as they treat the governments in some of these despotic regimes.
And yet they hit the administration, President Trump, a couple days after the election. You got Sergey Brin up there. You got a brilliant guy, brilliant people, but criticizing this administration's immigration policy when they're assisting despotic, basically, you know, obviously communist regimes overseas. But Trump's the threat?
I think we have American foreign policy on the right track on each of the dimensions that you're describing, and when we get it right, when we ultimately see the end result of President Trump's efforts, I think you'll see many of these things in a place that America has not seen before.
And later in the show, Secretary of State Pompeo will provide exclusive reaction to a new undercover video of a State Department employee hinting at a resistance inside the department. And next, Raymond Arroyo is here. Roseanne is about to die, and horribly, on TV at least, and the hidden sex lives of the Muppets. A wild seen and unseen. Stay there. Seen and Unseen segment where we explore some of the big cultural stories of the day. How will Roseanne meet her demise when her formerly eponymous show is rebooted? And why does Sesame Street feel compelled to put out a statement about Bert and Ernie's sexuality? To answer these pressing questions on such a big news night, we're joined by Raymond Arroyo, New York Times bestselling author of the Will Wilder series, Fox News contributor. Raymond, gosh, there's a lot to get out there. What the heck is going on?
Big news night.
What the heck is going on with these stories?
Well, on Sesame Street, it's brought to you by the letter S for sexualization. A writer, Mark Saltzman, who wrote for Sesame Street from 1984 to about 1998, did an interview this week with something called Queerty, in which he said this, and we'll put it up on the screen. He said, "I always felt that without a huge agenda, when I was writing Bert and Ernie, they were gay. I didn't have any other way to conceptualize them or contextualize them. The other thing was, more than one person referred to Arnie and I, he and his lover, as Bert and Ernie." So he was claiming that Bert and Ernie are gay. Now, this has been talked about. We've seen it mentioned since 1969 when these two characters, who were roommates on Sesame Street.
I just thought they were puppets.
Muppets. Of course, they're famous Muppets. Well, Frank Oz has now come out. Frank Oz, who created Yoda and Miss Piggy and Fozzie Bear, and was very instrumental in creating this characters. He tweeted out almost instantaneously, "Oh, goody. It seems Mr. Mark Saltzman was asked if Bert and Ernie are gay. It's fine that he feels they are. They're not, of course. But why that question? Does it really matter?
Yes.
Why the need to define people as only gay? There's much more to a human being than just straightness or gayness. He went on to say, I created Bert. I know what and who he is. Now, this is a real important. Why does this matter? And why are we sexualizing and politicizing these beloved children's characters? And we see this with Harry Potter. I've even seen it with Pooh and Piglet. Children's characters, particularly as an author, they should be sacrosanct. There's something innocent and beautiful about them. When you try to politicize them, and it tells us something about our culture, where we want to be adolescents forever and take these childhood icons and then impose our own hang-ups and problems onto them.
All right, so
I'm really opposed to this.
So
Leave Bert and Ernie alone.
So what's Eeyore? I'm just kidding.
Oh,
so,
stop.
So what else? What's the next topic?
Well, the next topic is Roseanne in an interview this week, and this is connected, interestingly enough. She spilled the beans on how the ABC reboot of her show, The Connors, will apparently, when the show returns in a few weeks, there's going to be some sad news for fans. Watch.
What's going to happen to Roseanne Connor?
Oh, they killed her.
They killed her.
Yeah, they had her die of an opioid overdose. So it wasn't enough to just do what they did to me. They had to so cruelly insult the people who loved that family and that show.
Now, she's obviously impugning the motives here and saying ABC wants to hurt not only her and the character she created, but the audience. I mean, she's dying of an opioid overdose. Wow. We knew in the reboot that she was taking pills for a knee injury, but now she's an opioid junkie? I mean, this is really
stupid. They're killing their ratings. That's what they're doing.
Well, that's the question. Look, they're going to kill Roseanne off this way, but my feeling is this show is going to die of Roseanne deprivation. Watch. This reboot will never work.
It's over. And actor Jack Black, what is he up to?
Jack Black received a star on Hollywood's Walk of Fame this week, Laura. I know you were ready, had the DVR set.
Couldn't wait.
He was moved, he was grateful, and political. Watch.
I love you all so much, except for Donald Trump's a piece of shit. Peace out, love you!
Now go eat another cheeseburger.
Well, he's promoting a movie, The House with Clocks in Its Walls. He's the actor with rocks in his head, I think.
Clocks? Wait. The movie is The Clocks on the Walls?
No. The House with Clocks in Its Walls.
It's another Dr. Seuss like.
Well, it's a children's book.
All right.
But again, children were present at this ceremony. Jack Black does a lot of kids programming, and his own children were there. Why would you taint this moment when you're being honored? And if you really despise this person, this president, why are you invoking him and using a profanity to sort of tar him at the end?
But this is all they have. I mean, you know what I was watching this afternoon? This is when like the
Family
golden oldies. No,
Judge Judy. What were you watching?
No, I was watching Judge Judy. I love Judge Judy.
I know you.
No, I was watching Johnny Carson's interview in 1975.
Oh boy, very contemporary. Ingram's right on top of things. She knows exactly what's going on.
Ronald Reagan.
Oh boy.
And it was. I mean, everyone has to watch this. I'm going to put it up on my Facebook page.
Okay.
It is so interesting because late night television was like classy. It was funny. Yeah. Reagan was, of course, unbelievable. But Carson was just so cool, and it's not nasty. No. It wasn't nasty. It was interesting.
No, he had charm. They were great. But
Reagan, I mean, nothing touches that today. All they can do is get up and okay, expletives, fine. We all say expletives, but I mean, that's not funny.
Mount an argument. If you want to convince people, mount an argument. You're a celebrity.
And you're not
throwing out invective like that. It doesn't work.
No.
I'm with you. Give me Johnny anytime.
Oh, see, I'm doing Yoda. You're doing Johnny. This is only Wednesday.
Seen and unseen.
All right. The left is obsessed with learning every detail about Stormy Daniels' love life. But when it comes to one of the most politically combustible issues of our time, they just don't care. Bongino and Schlapp on the declassification next. The left is wide-eyed and frankly salivating over every salacious detail of Stormy Daniels' love life. But when it comes to issues here in Washington, like the surveillance of American citizens, they don't have much interest. Take Trump's impending declassification of Russia-related documents. Now Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff are calling to block the declassification. 11th hour obstruction seems to be the preferred tactic of the modern Democratic Party. Joining us now from Florida is Dan Bongino, a former Secret Service agent, and here in the studio with me, Matt Schlapp, the chair of the American Conservative Union. Dan, let's start with you. I know you're not surprised by this, but this is now just so transparent. They're either great actors or they're really worried about what's in these documents.
Laura, you know what's the most comical about this? I'm trying not to laugh. Is even the left can't make up their own mind what they want. Laura, do you remember a few months ago, you know what, let's go back even 6 months or so, when the Nunes letter came out and exposed this entire Spygate, Russiagate scandal for what it was, do you remember what the Democrats said, Laura? They said, oh, no. The real information, what we use to target Donald Trump, is in the additionally redacted material. And then when the redacted FISA came out, and it turned out they used the dossier, what did the Democrats say again, Laura? No. Next time, it's the redactions that contain the really devastating material about Donald Trump. Let's release it. Then all of a sudden, when they got wind of what was actually in the redactions, now all of a sudden, wait, time out. We throw the red flag on the field here. We don't want to see the redactions anymore.
Yes. It's a threat to national security. That's what they're saying. Eric Swalwell, your favorite, Matt Schlapp, was out there on CNN today making this point.
This is quite lawless of the president to selectively declassify. You know, he's only putting forward to the American people what he believes helps him, completely and recklessly risking sources and methods who could be put at risk and have their lives at risk.
Oh, he's so smart the way he says sources and methods. It's like right out of James Bond.
You know what selectively means, Laura? That the president, the commander-in-chief, is going to make responsible decisions about the information that does get out and is made public and the information that doesn't. I'm glad that he's going to do that. By the way, you talk about the liberals on the Hill that are like raising objections about national security. I have journalists reading about journalists saying this is reckless. When is the last time, magazines and newspapers talked about how reckless it was for them to get information from the government? They'll print anything that makes the Army or the Marines or the Navy look bad, but...
Yeah, anonymously. So, Bongino, that's a great point. So now there's an aggressive lack of curiosity on the part of the American media. Don't give us more information. We don't want to know. It's like hands over the eyes. See no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil, write no evil. No, we don't want to know. Schlapp made a great point. This is so transparent, seamless coordination between the Democrats and the dinosaur media.
And listen, this reminds me of that Billy Madison line. I award you no points. We're all dumber for having this conversation. Laura, the New York Times outed Stefan Halper. They're the ones that outed the source. They didn't use his name, but they gave you every single identifier outside of his initials and home address so that every single person knew who he was. The New York Times outed this guy. I mean, are we living in bizarro Superman land or like that Seinfeld episode where he does everything backwards? This is crazy. They outed him.
All right, guys, real quick, in just moments, part 2 of my interview with Mike Pompeo is going to air, and I'm going to ask him about this undercover video at the State Department. But there's another video that's been released involving the DOJ, and another is going to be released tomorrow. Let's watch this first one.
What are they doing? Anything to fight against Trump? Yeah, I mean, a lot of us talk about it. So most of them are vaguely politically involved. So they might support candidates and do fundraisers, and some of them canvass. Okay. And then there's a lot of talk at work about how we can resist from inside. Yeah. And there's a lot of kind of let's go. What the DOJ? We can't fire.
Matt Schlapp, a little hard to read that script, but we talk about how we can resist from the inside, and there's a lot of kind of pushback. It's kind of lucky because at the DOJ you really can't be fired. I'm actually offended most by the Valley Girl speak of a taxpayer-paid salary. But what do you make of this?
Well, look, anybody who's worked in a Republican administration realizes what the real swamp is. The real swamp is Republicans win the presidency, but the agencies are populated by people who live in Maryland, Northern Virginia, and D.C. who are overwhelmingly Democratic. And getting a handle on these agencies with your own agenda, like the Trump agenda, is damn near impossible. And this is something that if Trump, he's done so many things I can't believe he's doing. If he could do something to change the system where you could actually fire people who are breaking the law by overturning the will of the voters on the agenda, that would revolutionize America.
Dan, we haven't independently verified the Project Veritas video, but the DOJ is taking it very seriously, as we'll see in a moment, the State Department. But your reaction to this, it seems like we do have a very active, young resistance burrowed inside our government and the civil service, and they're very bold, frankly brazen and stupid about how they talk about their political affiliations and activity on taxpayer time.
Yeah, Laura, this is personal to me. I mean, I was a Secret Service agent. I loved my job. I had no personal problem with President Obama, but I felt the country was moving in the wrong direction, and I thought it was inappropriate to stay. I left. I would not take the taxpayer dollars anymore. Ran for office. It didn't work out. But, listen, I'm not looking for everybody's pat on the back, but if you have a serious problem with the will of the people, because Matt's right, they're not resisting Trump. They're resisting you. The American people voted for Trump. Yeah. This is your will, and they're collecting your money to do it. Then stop being cowards and just resign. And you have the First Amendment right to go out and be an activist. Yeah, get out.
And get out. All right, guys, thank you so much. And next up, part 2 of my interview with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. What does he think of that shocking undercover video we just talked about, in which an employee at his own department talks of a resistance within the Trump administration? His answer next.
Only one OTC.
First, it was the anonymous New York Times letter, and now it's an undercover video that an employee at the State Department is seen hinting at a resistance within the Trump administration. In part 2 of my exclusive interview with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, we get his reaction to that and much more. Watch. Russia versus China. There's a lot of focus on Russia because of election meddling, threats of future election meddling, Ukraine, relationship with Europe and trade and so forth. As you see things, who's the bigger threat to the U.S. position in the world, economically, strategically, Russia or China?
I often get asked these prioritization questions, and it always makes me a little bit queasy to answer them. They present such different concerns. To rank them, I think sometimes sends the wrong message to the American people. Russia has been aggressive. Russia has tried to meddle in our election. Russia under Vladimir Putin remains a bully. We need to push back and constrain them where we can. But longer term, if you're looking at the things that threaten American livelihoods, that put America truly at risk of its continued economic growth, China presents the far greater threat to the United States.
There was concern from the foreign policy elites, Mr. Secretary, early on and expressed throughout this administration that, the Trump team kind of bumbles through these events. They go out and promise a lot, but then the deliverables aren't there. Of course, they cite North Korea. North Korea is not denuclearizing in the pace that maybe we thought they would and so forth. But what's the real status with our relationship with Europe and our relationship with the North Korean leadership, given how things have transpired?
Well, I'll start with North Korea. We have made steady, albeit slow progress, but we've always known this was going to take some time. The South Koreans had a successful engagement, President Moon with Chairman Kim, just over the last 48 hours. Where we made another step where we will get verification of an element of North Korea's program on the ground. That's a good thing. We're moving forward. The relationship between Chairman Kim and President Trump is good. I talk to my counterparts there with some frequency. It doesn't get reported. I'm glad about that. I'm glad we're able to keep that quiet. And so we're making the progress that we need. With respect to Europe, look, there was a reset that needed to take place in the relationship. We needed Europe to step forward and begin to share the burden of defense for the European countries in a way that they had not done under previous presidents. President Trump's trying to right that ship. We still have a fascinatingly important relationship with Europe, and I'm confident that that transatlantic relationship will always remain.
Project Veritas, I'm sure you know, released this video, a State Department analyst kind of bragging about his exploits working for the Democratic Socialists of America, typing things after hours and so forth. But it's a concern. Other videos coming out, DOJ employee, similarly part of the resistance, perhaps bragging about it. Does this portend more problems of a internal resistance to this administration. Are you concerned about it, and what next in this investigation of this particular employee?
So Laura, I can't speak about the particular case, but rest assured we're aware of it and we're taking a good look at it. But step back for just a minute. Here's